All right, awesome, cool. Thanks everyone. Thanks again for joining. So yeah, we have got this really great webinar titled "Securing the Future of Web3" with Mandiant. I think it's obviously been top of mind for the entire industry in terms of security issues and challenges, especially with major hacks that have been happening in the industry recently. And we found this top of mind for many of our partners and customers, and wanted to give you a run through of course what we've been working on, what we have to share in terms of ideas from Mandiant and Google Cloud as well as one of our customers, Polygon. Just a note, if you want to ask any questions, please use either the chat feature or the Q&A feature in the bottom right-hand corner. You should be able to see that in the room. And the session will be recorded and put up on our YouTube channel afterwards as well. Here's a summary of what we're going to go through today. So we're going to give you a very brief overview of the current state of Web3 security, followed by real-life learnings and I think case studies that the Mandiant team has seen in the industry. We'll then go through a very detailed overview of how GCP and Mandiant can help together, and round things off with a nice overview from Mudit, who is the CTO of Polygon. Cool. I'll hand it over to Adrian then to kick things off. Oh, sorry, and just a recap of who our speakers are for today, as I just mentioned. So we have Adrian from Google Cloud, who's a Web3 principal architect, Avinash Shetty, who is a Mandiant consulting lead and also part of the APAC Mandiant Web3 task force, and of course Mudit Gupta, who's the CTO of Polygon. All right, and with that, Adrian, please go ahead.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Kathy. Well, I think just to fix things off, right, I think it's important to look at the numbers of what we can learn from the hacks, right, or heists that have happened. And so here you see of last year, kind of like the different types of attacks and how much money was stolen per different type of attack. And I think what's really interesting from this is that we can really have we can see two kinds of incidents from this table. The first one is for individuals, right? So that will be phishing scams, so on. And that represents a very small percentage of the total heists and the total amount stolen at the end of the day. What's really important is more for companies, right? Is what matters is more access control, and you see that most of the type of hacks is coming from there, right? So it's really what matters is securing private keys, securing the whole infrastructure, the whole Web2 infrastructure in order to avoid the Web3 hacks down the line, right? And when we look at most of the biggest hacks, it actually comes from the Web2 infrastructure. But there's most customers.
Hey Adrian, if I may just interrupt, I think there's some static noise in the microphone.
Around 80% of the heists come from Web2 infrastructure breaching, access control, and stuff like that, like we can see in the table here. And another thing that's quite interesting as well.
Adrian, can you guys hear us?
That we hear a lot that some customers think that they are safe because they use a custodian, right? And so most of the Web3 security is basically coming from.
Sorry, Adrian, we've got some audio issues.
Hey, Adrian, really can't hear you. You're very faint.
And how about now?
Yeah, now it's clear.
It's clear now?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Seems like it is.
Okay.
Okay.
So actually, the room had an audio issue.
Yeah.
I just try.
Yeah.
Did you get something or nothing?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah. Let me know if it's if it comes back or if there is any issues with the audio. Yeah. Thanks a lot. So I was basically saying that if we look at the numbers from the past hacks, right, and the past heists that have happened, we can really see two types of incidents. the first one is incidents for individuals, and it's basically like phishing scams, smart contract issues, and vulnerabilities, and so on. And at the end of the day, that's quite a small percentage of the total hacks and the total money stolen. Where it really matters is more the hacks from companies, right? And what matters for them is more access control, right? Being able to secure their private keys, their custody, their treasury, and make sure that their whole Web2 infrastructure is well secured in order to avoid the Web3 hacks, right? It's really securing the Web2 in order to avoid the Web3 assets being stolen. And it's good to focus on the Web3 smart contracts and so on, but at the end of the day, it's a small percentage, and around 80% of the heists come from typical Web2 infrastructure. And something else as well that's quite interesting is that a lot of customers that we talk to think they are safe because they use a custodian or a provider, right? So it's actually far from being true, right? Because you need to secure also your signing schemes, who can secure, who has access to the API keys, and who can trigger a signature, and so on and so on. So I think looking at that numbers is quite interesting to show how Web2 and Web3 actually interact together. And through the presentation, we'll actually talk about these kind of things. And now I think I will give it to Avinash, who is actually on the ground with Mandiant and working with a lot of these Web3 heists and hacks.
Sure. Thanks, Adrian. Greetings, everyone. So in the context of typical intrusion, Mandiant tracks how attackers operate with what we call as a targeted attack lifecycle. So attackers often follow through predicted sequence of events, which we club into phases of attacker activities. So on your screen, you will see several phases. So the first phase often is initial recon, where attackers often gather the details of the potential victim that is publicly available. So this could be details about the developers, what are some of the wallet information publicly available. Now, this is often outside the remit of the organization. This is where we see some of our partners working very closely with their threat intelligence vendors. Now, once the attacker has zeroed in who the victim is going to be, they will pivot into what we call as an initial compromise phase, which is where they develop the tools that they've developed. They will use that to compromise the environment. Here we often see them resorting to social engineering or some kind of supply chain attack to compromise the victim. Now, after the initial compromise, the attacker is inside the environment, right? So post which we see them performing tasks to reinforce access to the environment, where they deploy additional backdoors to maintain their access. Now, once the attacker has reinforced their access to the environment, they then pivot into what we call as identifying the assets within the environment and moving laterally. So in this phase, the motive of the attacker is to find out what all information repositories are there, to glean as much as information possible to understand the workflow or sequence of events related to what the organization. So where we see attackers accessing the GitHub repositories, the application repositories, or the vaults where the sensitive informations are stored. So these are, this is a cyclical phase, as you see the arrow moving in across those 4 phases. Now, once the attacker has completed the tasks within these 4 phases, he's got a fairly good understanding of the environment, which is when they pivot into the next phase of actually executing the malicious activity. So in the crypto world, this could be transacting the actual fraudulent crypto transactions, which would then result in the wallets to be drained out. So from breach until the impact is wherein the attacker is inside the environment. Now, often we coin a term called as dwell time, which is the number of days an attacker is present in an environment that has been compromised before they are detected. Now, specific to Web3, we've seen attackers being able to achieve their objectives, that is from breach to impact, within a week. So that's, within a week, we've seen attackers moving from the breach to the impact phase. What that implies is we often see some of these Web3 clients not having their security posture up to the mark, which allows the attacker to operate freely in the environment. So that's why it's important for the Web3 clients to enhance their security from both Web2 and Web3 perspective, especially from a detection, hardening, and validation perspective to strengthen the environment. Now, we're going to present 3 specific use cases today. And now, before I jump into that, some of the common attack paths that we see are highlighted in this slide. So we often see developers being coaxed by attackers, by reaching out to the developer via social engineering. This could be either social media, LinkedIn job posts. The other vector we see is a front-end application vulnerability. So that often gets exploited by the attackers to maintain access to the environment. And recently we've seen a supply chain variant of attack where the environment where the wallets are hosted were compromised to perform the fraudulent activities. So we're going to present an elaborated view around how these 3 attack vectors manifested into the transfer of cryptocurrencies. Now, the first case that I'm going to talk about is a web server compromise. So in a normal day-to-day activity for this specific client, a user would log into the web server if they want to deposit or withdraw cryptocurrencies. Now, internally, the web server would communicate back to a ledger database. Now, the client had their own private chain. Apparently, by design, once the information is updated to the ledger database, that information will send to the transaction server, which is the step 3. And then in parallel, the internal private chain would be updated as well. And subsequently, that information will be sent to the public chain. So this is a simple basic design which enabled these clients' users to access their Web2 and Web3 integrated architecture. So how the attacker compromised this environment? So what we found was their front-end server had an application vulnerability which was compromised by the attacker. Now, this web server by design had a service account which was enabled to update the entries in the database. Now, once the attacker came into the environment, we could see that they ran several queries against the database to determine what is the structure of the database. If a transaction is performed, where would the cryptocurrency details would be stored. Once the attacker figured out the layout of the database, furthermore, they gained access to the application code as well, which gave them insights into the database transactions being sent over to the transaction server. So which is wherein attacker then, instead of going through the authorized way of signing into the web application, they manually injected an entry to the database, which was then picked up by the transaction server and was then committed to the blockchain. So this was, I would say, fundamentally often what we call as a rudimentary way of compromising. Now, what we found was there was an implicit trust across multiple systems. So if we look into the flow of information, the transaction server never went back and checked with the web server whether the user is actually authenticated. So there was an implicit trust that was baked into the information flow. Now, post the breach, we worked closely with the client to ensure that the attacker was effectively removed. We assisted them with verifying their source code and shared additional guidance around what kind of validation should be implemented on the financial transaction workflow. Now, the next use case is around how attackers use from a simple social engineering mechanism and which then resulted in the heist. So DPRK and access attackers employ sophisticated social engineering techniques, which then results in breaching the client environment. Now, one variant we often see here is DPRK-based IT workers as well. So we have seen, especially in certain Web3 clients who hire remote IT workers, we have seen in certain cases there have been IT workers associated with DPRK. So either ways, post the initial breach. So in this case, the attacker reached out to the developer in the victim's environment over Telegram. They said, I have got a job opening for you. Would you be interested to explore this opportunity? The developer didn't react initially, but after pursuing with the developer for close to a week or 10 days, the developer did respond. Now, one of the asks from the attacker was he wanted to test the attacker's ability to develop a code. So they shared a Git link, which the developer downloaded, but unknowing to the developer, it contained the malware. So if you see here, in step 2, the developer downloaded the Git link. Once the developer downloaded the Git link, it resulted in the installation of backdoor, which connected to additional attacker-controlled infrastructure, and then reinforced the backdoor on the developer system. So by step 5, the attacker was actively operating on the developer system. Now, what our observations while investigating the Web3 environment is often the development community has fairly higher privileges to their Web2 infrastructure. So in this instance as well, we found the developer had administrative access to their cloud environment. Now, because of which, what happened was, because the attacker is on the system, once the developer logged on to the cloud environment, the attacker managed to steal the session token for this cloud environment. And then he directly accessed the cloud environment. So if you see the step 7 here, the attacker replayed the hijack token, and now the attacker is essentially admin on the cloud environment. Now, often our client asks us, hey, there should be MFA that is protecting the cloud environment, but because the attacker could steal the session token, it bypasses the requirement of an MFA. And these session tokens are often valid for at least 10 to 12 hours, if not longer. So now attacker is in the environment and accesses the cloud environment as well. What we found was the attacker then was trying to access the cloud-based servers directly. Now, we found the client was well versed with the security requirements, so they had enforced second factor authentication on the internal servers as well, and access was restricted via what we call as a bastion host or a jump host. Now the attacker figured that out because they had access to the cloud environment. They changed the policies because of which the MFA requirement was disabled, and now the attacker could directly log into these servers. So these servers were publicly accessible. Now because the attacker had removed the requirement of a second factor authentication, they could directly access the server. Now the attacker went through the code repositories on the server. They figured out there were some hard-coded credentials in one of the scripts which would commit the transaction details to the wallet server. So once the attacker gained access to the credentials, it was just for him to identify the wallet address and then commit the transaction onto the wallet. So in this specific case, what we again worked quite closely with the client. What we found was the client had access to multiple log sources. See, for a DPRK Nexus attacker, these guys are highly skilled and very stealthy. So we have to notch our game as well to detect their presence. Now we can only detect depending upon what we log. So logging capability has to be validated as well. Now for this particular client, we found the logs were available, but they were distributed across the environment. It was not on one platform where their security team could aggregate and then perform some kind of analysis. So we help them in the aggregation. We then built our own intelligence and enabled them with the use case development, and then help their SOC to enhance their detection capability. Now, the next use case I have is what we call as a supply chain compromise. Now, just a quick background here is, now what we observe, many Web3 security solutions often focus on protecting the private keys. Well, it's understandable that securing the private key is often important, but we see an issue in transaction transparency, right? So on the screen, you see a typical format of a multi-signature wallet. So it's a digital wallet that requires multiple approvals or signatures to authorize a transaction. So by design, multi-signature wallets offer an enhanced layer of security because the controls are distributed. So in the diagram, you see there are 3 approvers who are using 3 different systems, and they're using 3 different hardwares to authenticate, to sign the transaction. So by design, it looks foolproof. So how would it work if this particular entity want to sign a crypto transaction? So they have their wallet hosted in a third-party environment. So they will access this third-party environment web UI, and one of the signers would first initiate the transaction saying that I want to transfer money from my cold wallet to the hot wallet. And often we observe, internally these 3 signers have a separate chat group created amongst them. And the first signer will say, I have signed this transaction, I would need you to sign. And then the subsequent signers would sign the transaction, and that's where the signing is completed and the fund is transferred from the cold wallet to the hot wallet. Now, one critical piece missing here is validation of the information here, right? So this is where what we see, there are 2 types of signing. One is the cold signing, and the other one is the blind signing. In cold signing, the transactions that the signers have to authorize is visible in plain text. But often we see, because there are non-standard, non-conformant standards in the metadata being exchanged for each transaction, many wallet types, hardware wallet types, enforce the need for blind signing. Now, what that implies is with blind signing, the signers would not be able to see the information in plain text. So what we've done, just to make it, visibly, to make it appear visibly how it would see on the hardware token, what we've done is this text, we have text encoded. And now this text encoded information would appear like this. Now, this is how it would be seen on a signer's hardware wallet as well, or something similar. Now, if on the basis of this, if somebody is approving a transaction, so there is a big risk of being transparent about the transaction that is being signed. Now, so even though by design, the requirement of multiple signers authorizing the fund transfer is foolproof, but we often say because of these transparency shortcomings, attackers often abuse this and leverage this as an abuse vector. So what did we observe in this specific environment? So the flow is still the same. So one of the signers would initiate the transaction. Now what we found was in this third-party environment where the wallet was hosted, the attacker had compromised this environment. So they had injected malicious payload in this environment. Now, because of which, when the signer initiated the signing, the first transaction, in return, the payload that was sent was a malicious payload. That payload contained information about, changing the authority, changing the destination address, and all those details. Now, because the information was sent in blind signed format, and because internally the initiator of this transaction said that, hey, this is the transaction that I have created, there was no due diligence maintained by the signers. So which is when all the 3 signers said that, okay, we're going to sign this, and then which is what resulted in the approval of the fraudulent update to the smart contract address, and in turn approval for the fraudulent transaction. Yeah, so these are the use cases that we see. Now, as I said, for this particular environment as well, so we work very closely with the client and then we inform them the risks of depending upon a third-party environment while hosting your wallet. So there is a risk associated with that. Even though by design, multi-party signatures seems like a good solution in terms of the overall security architecture, but we do see risks associated with it, wherein the attackers could bypass the controls. So specific to these scenarios and specific to Web2 and Web3, how Google and Mandiant can help you, for that I will pass it back to Adrian.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Avinash, for the explanation. So, the approach that we have is basically to combine the Mandiant expertise, so that Avinash explained here, with the threat intel that we have, that also has an accent in Web3, and the suite of security tools that we have that are all designed to enhance the resilience. So the first pillar is really how can Mandiant help to answer the three questions that are: am I breached, am I ready, and am I secure, which are typical security question. And so we can help you across and throughout your security journey here. The second pillar is the threat intel. So here, this intelligence is of course consumed by our Mandiant experts, but they can also feed our tools, and they are also, they can be leveraged directly by our customers. We have reports that are given and so on that often include stuff like briefings on attack trends and that are affecting crypto. We have actionable indicators such as wallet addresses, Telegram handles, and IP addresses and stuff like that. And so also with the threat intel, you can understand trends and TTPs to stay ahead of the curve. And you can also train and upskill your teams based on those. There's also insight on the latest malwares and how to understand how they're built, how they're used in order to have better defense. And finally, of course, we have all the tools that we have, like Chronicle, security, SCC, and so on and so on. So why Google, right, for Web3 security? I think it can really be split into these two categories here. The first thing is that Google Cloud has a lot of the Web3 expertise. We have teams focused on Web3 with deep Web3 expertise. We have dedicated products and offerings. Not many people know it, and it's quite recent. But for example, the most used Ethereum faucet is from Google. We also run validators on multiple chains. We are indexing a lot of data from different chains, and so on and so on. You can find all of this information in the Web3 portal from Google. You can just Google it. And we also, of course, experienced, working across multiple Web3 verticals. So working with exchanges, but also with chains and dApps and so on, right? So we across every type of Web3 customers. And then on the Mandiant side, I think it's really very important to note as well that Mandiant is cloud agnostic, right? It's a unique actor who can understand the decentralized Web3 context, all right, to do investigation and to investigate basically these attacks. And those attacks that can span on-chain and off-chain, similar to what Avinash explained in the different cases that we've seen here. And that makes it very, very important. We have experience working with different signing schemes and signing solutions, whether it's solution providers, MPC, multisig, so on and so on. We've worked with the biggest and heists in the industry, a lot of expertise as well in North Korea. And it's not just about incident response. We can help throughout the whole journey in design and architecture and review and red teaming as well. And we'll show a little bit more about what it looks like. So these are some resources that we've previously released and we think are interesting. Especially, we can recommend this DEF CON presentation from Joe Dobson, who is part of our threat intel team. A lot of great insights here, and also excellent article from Josh Goddard about securing cryptocurrency organizations, also giving some actionable items and on how to have better security. And as we talked about as well, North Korea is also a big actor in the space. And there is a great read that is here, that is on the blog, about staying a step ahead on the DPRK topic. So also recommend it. Okay. So, and I reiterate here, but I think one of the biggest advantage of working with Mandiant, for example, is that they don't only cover the Web 2 infrastructure, but also understand the Web 3 context, looking at the smart contracts, the wallets, the dApps, and everything Web 3 in order to find issues in your Web 3 infrastructure, but also the Web 2 infrastructure. And the reason for that is quite simple, right? If you find an issue on the Web 2 infrastructure because of the Web 3 context, maybe the impact will not be the same, right? If you find a private key, like you can get access to a specific private key, for example, maybe the private key doesn't mean anything or doesn't do anything. If you don't look at what is this private key controlling in terms of what function it can call on Spark contract, for example, or what this private key holds on chain, you cannot know what really is the impact. So it's important to really have the context of on and off chains. And also a small note that we do not do smart contract audits, but we look at them, right? Okay. So basically, what we do is that we are introducing new solutions from Mandiant, and we have these solutions that you can see on the right here. So we've looked at the different risky events from Web3 customers and where they are most at risk. So of course, when launching mainnet, when doing TGE event, of course, signing and doing some custody change is always an issue, setting up new organizations. And then we've created specific bundles based on our Web3 expertise and experience on the three pillars that we've looked at. And we are able to create these kind of like these solutions at a high level, but we also have some more deep dive on them. I won't go through all of them, of course, but we can just take a look at a high level what it means. So we have security for mainnet, whether it's a chain or whether it's a dApp that you're launching. We can look at, of course, the private keys, but the application, the interaction with the different smart contracts. We can look at security for TGE, looking at the claiming pages and insider threats as well that are very important for TGE events. We can look at security for new organizations, looking at how you do hiring, for example, how you do onboard or offboarding of employees, which is a big topic for Web3 companies. How do you vet them and so on. And also helping augment the team with security experts, for example, to help you get started and to do holistic reviews of the security foundations of companies. And of course, around security for custody and signing, and I'll do a double click on this one specifically, is looking at how you do key management and how you manage your whole signing process, which is of course very important. And the last thing is, a lot of people think about Mandiant this way, is if there is a problem, of course, you can of course call Mandiant, and we have an incident response specifically for Web3 as well, where we can do quick response and containment, and we look at the root cause of what happened. We can do forensics, and then we try to recover, and then even do some kind of like freezing contingency if something bad happens. Okay, so when we think about all of these things that we can do, I think it's important to look at the tools that are needed, right? And that we recommend you have in your infrastructure to be able to do this kind of exercise. Because we see that a lot of tools are underutilized or even sometimes not present. And that's why we created this slide with the most important to the least important kind of tools that we think are important that you are using. And for example, a lot of the hacks that we've seen in the past year could be avoided with better endpoint detection and response, some EDR tools. And so those are, whether you use the Google native ones or others, I think those tools are very important that you have in order to get the best out of any consulting and security consulting that you can have. Okay, so last slide, and then I will give it to Mudit here. This is a double click on the security for custody and signing and what we can do. So on the left here, you would have the different risks and the needs from the Web3 companies around custody and signing. And we talked a little bit with Avinash about the UI and the UX issues, the signing processes, and the third-party custodial risks as well. If you use a third-party supply chain attacks and so on. And then you would have kind of like the three pillars that we talked about: the expertise from Mandiant, the threat intel that will be consumed by the experts, but also by the company directly, why not, and the tools, right? And so Mandiant, what they can do can be split into these four categories. The first one is a security review, so a comprehensive review of the signing core processes, looking at the schemes, looking at the UI that is used by the signers, what is monitored, what is logged, and so on and so on. The second thing would be incident response planning, so we can help you either create or refine the incident response planning, specifically with regards to private keys. What happens if a private key is compromised or something like that? And then we have custom threat hunting, which is about detecting already existing threats or attackers, and Avinash had great examples of that as well in his presentation. And lastly, we can also, of course, do infrastructure penetration, attack simulation, and trying to either social engineering, but also trying to access some keys or sign something that is not supposed to be able to, by someone who is not supposed to be able to do, or bypass some flows, or whether it's from MPC scheme or any kind of signature scheme that you might have, right? So this is a typical example of things that we can do. But if you want to learn more, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I think with that said, I think right on time to give it to Mudit.
Cool. Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, Avinash. Yeah, Mudit, you're up. There we go.
Perfect. Thanks, folks. So, hey, everyone. I'm Mudit. I'm the CTO and ex-CISO of Polygon, leading engineering and security there. Mandiant invited me today to this talk to just talk about my experience working with Mandiant and where our security stack sits at right now at Polygon. So we'll jump straight into it. So first of all, I'll start with the past. So we started working with Mandiant almost 3 years ago. Started that exercise with the red teaming exercise. So I asked Mandiant folks to just come in and just try to break us. Starting with phishing, try to get in our infra, see how far they can make it. We had lots of learnings from that exercise that helped guide us our security program for the upcoming few years. One of the key takeaways there, which in hindsight is obvious, is that humans are the weakest link in security. So that's where you just gotta start securing your stack. Computers are usually better than humans. Alongside this exercise, we had Mandiant on retainer. So if shit hit the fan anytime, we had a reliable source to get in touch with. But luckily, we have not had to use that so far. Hopefully, we will not have to, but we have it in case we need it. Then we get to the present. So we built a security structure with layers. Layers are the essential component of security. Like the thing is, if you depend on any one layer, you will get hacked. Like any one given layer is going to get hacked no matter what you do. You just have to minimize the damage that compromising one layer does. The first layer obviously usually are the humans. So phishing awareness training is one of the most important things you can do, especially in the crypto space. State-sponsored actors like DPRK, folks from DPRK are very notoriously after everyone in this space. So at Polygon, we have dozens of attempted compromises from DPRK, like every week that we detect. Some probably that just go without detection. But yeah, like our security awareness training is very strict. So people are very careful about these scenarios. And our security team is a bit, how do I say, like a bit hard on these things. So I'll give you an example. Like just earlier this year, HR announced that, hey, like we are going to do comp reviews for everyone. You're going to get your new comp details through a DocuSign agreement in a couple of days. So keep an eye on it. The security team went ahead, impersonated our head of HR and just sent out fake comp letters to everyone. So that was a wake-up call for some people to not trust just random emails and verify where the email is coming from. But also it just shows how thorough we are in our testing. Now it's a part of a process that if someone is opening or visiting any DocuSign agreement, they should go through our SSO instead of just directly relying on the email. You get the alert from email, then you open your Okta page, SSO, you go into DocuSign, and then you can see the document there if it's real or not. So yeah, humans, the first layer, then access control is very important. Humans, no matter what, will get breached. If it's not by a technical expertise, people are now starting to just do physical attacks as well, especially on crypto folks. There was a news just a couple of days ago with a CEO of a crypto exchange being attacked with his daughter in Paris. So there are physical $5 wrench attacks still going on, probably getting more famous than ever before. So access control becomes very important in these scenarios. For example, at Polygon, I probably have less access than the average employee in the company, just because I'm not the one doing day-to-day admin work in these things. So access should always be given based on requirements, not based on seniority. Like if someone, the CEO should have basically no access to any admin controls in the company, for example. So that's very important differentiating function to understand, that access should be based on requirements, not based on seniority or anything else. Then there are a bunch of other layers you can add. You should have an EDR. We use CrowdStrike, but definitely have something in place. I recommend SSO. Google has their sign in with Google, which is partially an SSO you can use. We use Okta. 2FA, definitely a must have everywhere. It's just another layer of security. Then moving a bit on code side, have proper SDLC guidelines, have proper trainings for employees, and so on. Just don't be disorganized, have at least a basic set of hygiene. Moving a bit on the Web3 side of things, the simplest changes you can make are, number one, just use hardware wallets everywhere. Do not use MetaMask or browser wallet for key management. Just use hardware wallets for storing your keys, and don't type your private key anywhere in the world, like not on your password manager, not on your Google Docs, nowhere. Just keep it safe on paper. Use hardware wallets. When interacting with a website, you can connect the hardware wallet to MetaMask and then use it for signing. So you have multiple layers. For bigger amounts, use multisigs, where hardware wallets are the signers to that multisigs, just adding another layer of security. For your code side, get smart contract audits done, get pen tests done, and so on. And then finally, you should also have an effective monitoring solution and a proper incident response plan. This is a mandatory thing for any mature security program. We have seen past, like in our space, especially, I wouldn't name companies here, but we have had $500 million hacks where the company didn't realize they're missing $500 million for a whole week till someone trying to get their money notified them, hey, like there's no money here. So definitely have effective monitoring, which can prevent hacks. In fact, a good example of this would be the Bybit safe incidents, which happened just a few months ago. If there was proper monitoring in place, this would have been prevented. The compromise of the UI happened 2 days before the exploit actually took place. So if there was actual monitoring on the UI, you could have detected and stopped this. So that's just an example of how important monitoring and incident response plans are. And secondly, like incident response plans are not just for preventing hacks, they're also very important for playing out scenarios when something has gone wrong. So make sure you have a checklist and have everything written down, like explaining what you have to do if something has gone wrong, especially the expected scenarios, because the reality is when something does go wrong, it's very hard to think with a straight mind. Like it is very helpful to have a list to follow through when you are in this panic mode and high stress situation. So that's where we are right now with the future stuff. So Polygon already took like 3-4 years to build our program to this stage of maturity that we are here right now. We had to do all of the work from scratch because there was nobody really offering any service around this, no consultancy, no advisory, nothing like that. I think I was probably the first CISO hired in this space outside the regulated companies. So I had to build everything from ground up. But you don't need to build everything from the ground up anymore. Don't need to reinvent the wheel anymore. All of the services Mandiant just talked about covers most of the things that we are already doing. So if you are starting a security program now, or if you don't have a mature program already, you can use Mandiant to just kickstart your security program. That's it from my side for now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mudit. That was great. And there you have it, folks. You heard it firsthand about actual experiences, a lot of learnings, and I think what would make sense for a lot of people going forward in terms of getting their infra set up. In terms of next steps, if any of you would like to schedule or set up a one-on-one session with the Mandiant team, please feel free to scan this QR code and just complete a couple of questions in terms of your name, contact details, and we will reach out to set this up for you. So I'll just leave this up on screen for a couple of seconds. You can scan the QR, complete the details, and yeah, we will set up something with you and the Mandiant team. Otherwise, we'll open it up for a couple of minutes for any questions that anybody in the audience has. Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself, and you can go ahead. Or, of course, paste in the chat as well. All right. If we don't have any questions for now, thank you, everyone. And yes, Akriti, we will be sharing a recording of this and we'll upload it to our YouTube channel. And also, if you need a direct link, happy to share it as well. Great. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it and hope you found this useful. And yeah, please do reach out so that we can take this forward with the Mandiant team.
Thank you so much.
Right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.